lesson. So here is the last time, the last lesson I went over, we were going over basic kind of pose to pose action. I'll just repeat it here. And it was just this character kind of, changing their expression, like from a smile, turning their head. We added like a little bounce down. So I talked about fleshing out keys, your keyframes of animation, and how to use them and kind of swap them around, change up the timing. We talked about using the timeline like a timing chart. So all of these things are going to come into play with this next stage. So I have kind of gone back and I have taken out the in-betweens. Because while this action's great, it's got like a little bounce to it. It's got some nice, we got some secondary on the ears, some squash and stretch. The head flip works well. Like, this is an action that if I was a supervisor and somebody was on my team and they approached the action like this, I would not be unhappy. I'd be like, oh, very nice and smooth, little bouncy, cool. But we're all about, or I'm all about, we're as in this channel that I run. Sort of, how do you get your artistic intent like out of your head? So when I am talking about these techniques that I'm using and these things that I'm using, again, comes with the caveat of you're not always going to use it in the job. I'm not telling you here how to animate a certain way, how to get a job. I'm telling you how I utilize different techniques, and especially when you have time to work on this stuff, a lot of the techniques that I'm going to get into, you may not always have time to do on a traditional animation schedule, like in TV and stuff like that. So I always want to parse this because oftentimes when we look to other people's animation and what they're teaching, we see that as the expectation. We see that as the goal, right? And I don't want people to think that the animation I do or the quality of animation I do is an expectation that you should set for yourself. These are things that are going to be built up to, right? And I have learned these things over the course of my entire career. So I just want to put that out there. Okay. I'm all about realistic expectations. So we're going to take this little bounce and we are going to, and this is the type of keyframes I like to do. And by keyframes, I mean sort of like breaking down the core parts of the action. Terminology isn't that important. It's the execution. But oftentimes what I see in not just Toon Boom animation, this came around a lot in when Flash became a standard. You saw this formula of antic, overshoot, and settle. And what that means is like your character will like pull back, bounce, and then settle up. And it kind of goes bonk, 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 bonk. And not just the formula of antic, overshoot, settle, but because digital assets, you often like would have different hierarchies, and you were manipulating more on a kind of like vector graphic. But when you're not redrawing frames, that kind of squashing, bouncing, like manipulating the forms, like that becomes the shorthand for movement. And again, nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. These things are the things that we build on to make the technology that we have now, right? But what that led to was a shorthand style with a lot of digital. I mean, you're going to like hand-drawn television to Flash, right? And with, I'm giving you a history lesson in front of this, in front of like the actual tutorial, but but the, you know, expectations rise with technology. So it's like, oh, well, you don't have to hand draw it on paper anymore. You don't have to scan it. So drawing it or just moving it around, you can do more, right? So with television animation, especially, you know, either be hand drawn or digital, it doesn't really matter. Uh, you know, the expectations are high. So this kind of antic overshoot subtle thing became a formula, and not only that, but like this idea of full body accents, right? And it just depends on what style of animation you want. But what you will often see is a trend. And I'm saying this as a trend, not as in a one thing is better than the other, right? Like, I just like to analyze things. The trend is moving the body all up and down and bouncing it all at the same time. So oftentimes you have the full character's motion is representing that full body accent, whereas I like to excuse me, I'm still getting over kind of a cold, so like my head's definitely not as stuck as it used to be. But people rely on the bounce to give their characters full movement when there are other ways of giving your characters full movement that don't require everything to bounce at the same time. And because what this can also do, again, there is nothing wrong with the mounts, the little up and down bounce, nothing wrong with that. But imagine you have a long scene, a whole episode, a whole feature film. One of the things that keeps your audience engaged is contrast. And if you use a formula, be it any kind of formula, your audience is going to get used to it and they're going to start zoning out. So contrast and kind of switching it up, be it, it doesn't always have to be in animation. It can be within any part of the storytelling. It can be like colors or music. You know, it's present in everything. But, you know, if we're talking character animation here, you don't want all characters to move the same. You don't want all of the character actions to move the same, because it lulls you into this sense of like no surprise, right? So all this preface to say, when I'm talking about the things I'm about to go over, it really helps with this. It helps with contrast. It helps not solving everything, but breaking yourself out of a formula. And I say this as someone who, I get stuck in the formula. I am very formulaic. I can be very mathematical. I very much struggle to not be formulaic. So I explain this from, these are the things that I do for myself that help me kind of switch it up a little bit, and I hope they help you too. And yes, this is all going to be posted on YouTube after I'm recording right now, so we should be good. Okay. Let's get you out of the way. That was a lot of talking. I'm going to take a quick drink, and now we're going to... I'm rambling for about 20 minutes about all this stuff. But this is all important context to the brain, you know? All right, so we have our little dude. Again, so I've gone back to my main quote-unquote keys. I think I have my infographic. Not my infographic, that's the wrong word, but... Oh! Timing... here we go. Oh no, that's not it either. Never mind. It's fine. It's my fault. Yeah. So if I wanted to adjust this and go, I want the character's full body moving. I want it to be full. That's the style I'm going for. I don't want to be formulaic. How do I do it without antic and overshooting, right? And you can still have an antic and an overshoot. Like, these things aren't bad. Antics and overshoot should be mechanically motivated. They're not default, though. They have a purpose to them. So it all depends on the motion that you do. But one thing, if I'm stuck and I'm like, I don't know, I just need to get this thing done. One thing that always helps me is deciding in my animation about what part of the body is leading and what part is following. And I'm not talking about, like, follow through of hair or materials or things like that. I'm talking about, like, first and secondary motion, things motivated by the body moving. And this could be, so for this here, right now, what's motivating? What's going first? What's being pulled? What's being pushed? Also, hi, Danielle. Also, hi, I wave. Hi. But it's moving up at the same time. It's all bouncing at the same time and settling up at the same time. So there's nothing, in my brain, there's nothing motivating. You could say maybe the hips-ish, but not really. Not really. So what you want to do is choose what's moving the body, right? So I am going to, I sort of made this decision last time, so I'm just going to follow through with it. One thing I thought, like, the feet slid a little bit too much in my original one. So I'm going to have the lower body, especially the legs, I'm going to have them lead the body. And this is something that I had a lot of coworkers that worked on the Mickey Mouse shorts, like the really wacky Mickey Mouse shorts, and, like, they worked on, like, the TV series with it. And I really liked studying the animation of those shorts because they were very snappy and very physically comedic, but they had this great, like, weight to them. And a lot of it was because there was so much pull from the lower body. The hips and the lower body would often, like, pull the torso and keep the head in place as, like, the neck was stretching. And I love using the lower body to lead that way. And I think it's a really good example. And I'll kind of show you, like, a little later on, like, two different examples with different timing. Getting ahead of myself. But so we're going to now approach these keys with having the upper body lead. So I'm just actually going to get rid of these keys because we don't need them, actually. These keys are based on the one before and after, and those are going to be changed. Thus, you don't need them, but I fixed the head flip. In my previous lesson, the head flips. This whole action was to correct a head flip. So these two keys are very important to me. Even though the lower and the upper body are going to be different, there's work here I want to save. So I'm just going to copy paste them over here, and then I'm going to erase them. And I'm going to grab those heads later. Save it. There we go. So now we're going to lead with the lower body. So what he's going to do is he's going to step out. And once you decide, oh, I'm gonna have, if they lead with the lower body, they're gonna step out. And if they're gonna step out, they need to like lift their foot a little bit. Immediately what that choice does is change my pose. Now, not only is, so like the legs going up, which means, and if we really want to be like nice and full with it, the hips are gonna tilt, right? Where I put the pivot, so I will always put the pivot where the like anchor point is. So if this hip is sort of like in place while the other one is going up, I'll stick the pivot over here and just skew it up. A little tilt to it. I'm gonna try not to be like perfectionist, because like I can get really particular. I'll try not to be particular. What that also means is we're gonna have to shift the weight back a little bit. So I'm just going to I'm just gonna skew all of it, I think. Now, skewing on big pegs isn't always like recommended. There you go. But if we use my rules, my posing rules that I said in the first lesson, which is if you touch something on a peg, you touch everything underneath it a little bit. If you do these things, it's actually not the larger skews or movements on the bigger peg isn't that big of a deal. Okay. I'm gonna skew that a little bit. Okay. So that's not that much different from what I had before. Actually, I'm gonna... No, don't be perfectionistic. Don't be perfectionistic. But I have to. Spacing, though. Negative space between stuff. Okay. So, here's the thing. When something is leading the body, or this is the way I see it. This is the way my brain parses this information. If something is leading the body, it's hitting the beats first. This means the lower body gets its own keys, right? It's the main character now. So the time that the lower body hits its apex, the upper part of its curve, so to speak, right? It's going to go up, and then it's going to go down in a little arc. Boop, boop. See how small? It's small. It's small. Small but important. But what this also means is that it's leading. It hits it first, which means the upper body will not hit its top of the apex, its top of the curve at the same time. It's going to hit it when the lower body starts to go down. Okay? So while this torso is like at its, like, let's say, extreme, quote unquote, it's not going to be on this frame. And this is where understanding pegs and mixing and matching really like comes in handy. So what has to be done is we're going to go up and hit a keyframe to make sure its keyframe's all the way down. It certainly is. Okay, I'm going to tween it. Now, what I am doing is I'm tweening And even though there's some stuff happening, you know, sometimes people look at tweens and are like, oh my gosh, it's exploding. I am not looking at those details. What I am looking at is the spacing of the main body, right? And I want to get something that is... Let's get a little drawing up here. So we got, this is frame 7, and this is frame, 14. I do all of this mentally. I'm trying my best to slow myself down and explain what the choices are. Ultimately, what I want is a keyframe. This is halfway. This is our halfway point. If I want a body spacing that favors frame 7, because what I want is a... like, basically the foot to come down straight and have the upper body still favoring the top of the arc. So that means I don't want to favor the crouch. I want to favor the upper body. So what I'm going to do is just put a little keyframe right here. You have to work from the big chunks inward. So, oh, hey there, keyframe, key. There we go. So now I have this, boop, 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 boop. Now, every time you stick a keyframe down on your tween, you are grabbing roughly the spacing you want. It doesn't mean it's a final frame. So now I'm gonna clean it up. Just gonna move it over. And also, this is where we go, okay, what's leading? The foot is leading. So I know the foot, and this is where I'm going to have to manipulate it a little bit, which is easy. Manipulate and skew. He's not taking a big step. Maybe I'll just move his foot out like that. Yeah. And oftentimes what I do is like I'll change the deformer shapes a little bit. Boop, boop. And ultimately what you kind of want is the feel of pull. At least for me, that's what you want. So maybe we're going to lift up this just for the sake of example. Juice has taken a really big, unnecessary step. But it'll work. It'll work for the example. This foot's shifting too much, so I'm actually going to tween it. And whenever something like shifts or moves too much, you can just tween it with, again, the keyframe you want to favor. Grab an in-between that's closer to it. There we go. I'm getting far too picky on this. I'm so sorry. Old habits die hard. Okay. It doesn't matter. It's close enough. I am extremely pixel fucky, which means I will nitpick. Oh no, spam. Delete. Oh, I meant to also ban. There we go. yeah, what you want to do is have the offset. So now his foot's going down. So this is where we go, okay, well, technically the leg is going down, which means the body should actually still be going up. It should be hitting its peak, like, apex, right? And we have that. We have, like, we may have this, like, weird, it's going weird now, but we can go to the peg. So I have my body and head peg. I use the center on selection tool, which goes straight to where I need to go in the timeline. And I'm just going to take it and move it over here. And then, well, it's like, well, now we don't have an in-between. It's like the torso just sticks. I will just stick a tween on it, and we will have to put a new in-between that eases in to this position. Okay. So whenever I make, this is why I work with, quote unquote extremes. When I'm doing my core posing, which I did in the second lesson, the first part of the second lesson, I am posing specifically to give myself the highest and the lowest forms, even if it's not going to end up on that keyframe, because I can move it around. I can copy paste. It's one of the few benefits of technology. Copy paste, for better or for worse, So we're not done, because just because we're swapping things around or we're copying pasting and stuff like that doesn't mean it works animation wise. We still have to flip, and by flip I mean I'm using it as a word, like flipping a paper back and forth. I do this to myself. And what I'm doing when you see me do this is I'm tracking the spaces of the proportions, like flipping paper. So we got, this goes up. So now you see the character is going up, and then as the leg's going down, we actually see the body is still stretching up. Great, so now we have some offset. And this is how you start to build in body offset mechanics into your keys. Now that doesn't mean they're grounded, and it doesn't mean they're spatially correct. So let's just spatially correct them. And this is where your art skills come in, right? This is where the spatial awareness and your knowledge of proportion and anatomy and all that stuff comes in. I'm actually going to keep moving the hips up, and then, yeah. Do that. Because then I can really have the legs stretch. So it's not the lower body leading it specifically, it's the leg. So now we have the body going up and then the leg going down. Now, could you also like ease into this and adjust the leg? Yes, it's fine. A lot of the times I talk about offsetting because I'm trying to show techniques rather than this is the proper way to do things. Sometimes I eyeball stuff. Sometimes I don't use these techniques, but it is the thought process and the understanding of it that matters. So you got this. He's coming up. Boop, boop, boop. And now we have to have the character start to come down and do that head flip, because any sort of flip in Toon Boom is part of your core keyframes, which means you need to have it in before you start with in-betweens, because you do not want any of this happening on your in-betweens. Okay. So now we're going to have... So we're kind of at the... A lot of times I visualize my timing charts like this. Where it's like, okay, we're up at the antic, we're down at the overshoot, and then we land here at the settle. Right? Like this is how my brain likes to visualize timing charts more, you know. So we're gonna have right now. I'm gonna change my color. Where's my color? Yeah. So right now, the upper body, kind of like the upper body and the waist. This is the upper body and the waist, which means this is where we get to the timing and spacing of it. They can have the same timing, but they're going to show up differently on the timeline. That's probably too confusing. I regret doing that. I'm so sorry. But what I want to do is have, right now we have the fastest part of the action for the leg, which means I'm probably going to want, like the leg sort of like here right now, which means I want this one. So I'm going to put a tween on my timeline, and I'm going to choose a frame that's more towards this part. Okay, so now we have the foot. Yeah, there's the settle up at the end, and just there we go. Okay, this isn't that bad. So what I want to make sure, and I always do this for feet, whenever a foot is like leading an action and really wants to step down, you want to make sure that you're not like accidentally, yeah, like right there, you want to make sure that it's that bottom line that's really gonna, it doesn't have to be perfect, but you want it to you want to make sure that it doesn't look floaty. You want to feel like it gives an impact. Okay. So the foot's hitting, and then we settle up. So even though the foot, so if we're doing antic over settle, so like the foot's already planted, right? But the upper body hasn't even technically like eased out yet. It's going to be pulled. So it is actually not in a state where it would be crunched over yet. Right here, this is a weight absorption pose, right? Like it's going down. It should not be going down yet. So when you think about lead and follow, be it any part of the body, shoulder, head, hips, legs, doesn't really matter. It gives you a force, it gives you like an action and a pull, and it helps you make your poses way more interesting. Your keyframes way more interesting. So let's go into the upper body. Use my center on selection tool. Okay. I'm going to delete this. I don't need it. It doesn't matter. It was just there to get the overall peg information. I work from large pegs in. So I'm going to tween it, and I'm going to get something, again, that favors the top. Because we're easing in, we're hitting our apex, and now we're easing out. Okay. I don't think. Keyframe. Excuse me. It does this sometimes. where for some reason it's like, come on, delete. Yes, this is the keyframe I want. Keyframe. Now, when I take off the tween, it shouldn't change. Okay, there we go. I just had to sass it. I just had to be like, don't do it. Okay. So what we're going for with these keyframes, because a lot of time when people see me putting down keyframes and going like, well, why are you, like, isn't it easier to just do it manually? Like, things are adjusting. What I'm trying to do is give myself a visual base that is structurally close to what I want, that has a little bit of movement on it. Because what that means is it's going to appear less flat. I actually like little mistakes. It helps gives like a human element to it. So I also, I'm just going to change something really quick because it's bothering me, because like the hip arc is not, the hip's not going in a, there you go. It's a little better. So here's where we start to think of the push and pull, right? And this is where deformers on the rig like really come in handy, right? Deformers work best not when you're making a whole other shape. They work best when you're like stretching a shape that you already have. So let's just gonna correct. So do a quick cleanup of this friend's pose. Oh, I should reiterate what I did. To remind everybody. So what's happening is his head is flipping. It's doing this. Yep. Yep. You know, head's flipping. So I don't want to delete the whole head. If I delete the whole head, it looks like this, right? Because it is referencing the keyframe before. So if I delete the head, it's just the same head, right? Now I don't want to do that. When I go to delete a flip, I make sure that the peg that has the flip on it, I only want to take it off of that one singular peg. Only that one singular peg. So this is the master peg. I am on the keyframe here. It is open, and I'm going to delete it. Now, is this the same? It kind of looks the same, but let's look closer. There is actually subtle squash and stretch. I can see it in my mind's eye. There are slight little movements to the brow and the shape. That was not on this singular peg, but it was on all these little pegs underneath it. Okay, so be aware that when I'm copying and pasting, I'm often, and I'm, deleting things, I'm often doing it only on the singular peg it affects. Okay. That. Just gonna put this down. Okay. So let's start on the mechanics. So I'm gonna move the torso up a little bit. Actually, I'm going to favor the upper body a little more. There we go. And I'm going to make it, I will stretch it, but not right now. So when you're offsetting things, obviously if you just, move the pegs around, it would look like different parts of the body are floating, right? This is the thing about offsetting in any sort of program like this. things disconnect. It looks like there are, the arms are floating off the puppets, right? So this is where you think about using the deformers and stretching things. So this is going fast, right? Like imagine the lower body moving so fast that the upper body doesn't have time to react, but it does need to feel connected. So how do you do that? Well, you stretch out the middle part. So it may mean that like the head and the shoulders stay more in place. But now we have this you see like I'm kind of working my way up in cleanup, but oops. Oh no, I don't want to do that. Didn't mean to animate all. There we go. Okay. Just smoothing out that line. Okay, now take a look at this. Character goes up. Ooh. As they go down, the lower body is shifting, is changing much more than the head. The head is staying in place. That's what I want, right? Because the head's not there yet. It's going to be pulled down. This is what gives you the kind of steps toward not having everything sort of have that same, like hitting their extremes all at the same time. It's just these little things, and it helps you go, okay, cool. Well, then if the torso is pulling, it's stretching this, and it's stretching the shoulders. You can even, start to put follow through into it too. Because once you start thinking of things as this goes first, this goes next, this goes after, like kind of like a chain of events. So if we're thinking about the ears, so the leg pulls the waist and the torso, which pulls the head and the ears. So that means as this goes down, if the head was offset, if the head was following through, let's say it's the third, right? Lower body, torso, head. Now what do? Well, let's go into the head. Currently the head is at its apex at the same time as the torso, but he says it has to be. Oh, let's take this head and let's move it over. Again, we're missing a frame here, so I'll put a new one in. I'm going to favor the first pose. Okay. Now our original extreme head that was the most stretch, had the most like ears up, all that kind of stuff, is now offset from the body and the lower body. It doesn't mean, like I said, it doesn't mean it's spacing wise it works, but let's say it's still going up. And that means, the torso would stretch. Oops. Or like, well, there's a neck in there a little bit, But in order to not have it slide too much, let me turn off that so you can see better. So these are things, I'm gonna undo that because I want to actually flesh out a little bit more of the action before I do the drag. But these are the things that you can explore as you work on your animation. I am someone, as much as I tell people plan things out, like I plan things out if I'm intimidated by it, right? So if you are intimidated by a scene, if you look at a scene and you're like, oh my gosh, this is too much for me, plan it out, ask for help, ask for tips, get a friend to help, someone you trust to help you plan. That will always pay off. But a lot of the time, again, especially in TV animation, you may not have time to really plan out and know exactly what you want to do, right? You have a deadline, it's a scene, it's an assignment, you have stuff to do. You have to get it in. And for me, when I think about what's leading and what's following, it helps get me into a mindset of thinking about cause and effect. And once you get into that, well, if the lower body is pulling this, then this would drag behind. It allows you to experiment and offset some of the things in your animation. And you will find happy accidents. Sometimes it does not work. Sometimes you go, oh, I'm going to try to move this here, and it looks weird. And you're like, ooh, no, I take it back. But that's the great thing about the program, and what helped me a lot in my animation is the accessibility to play around and experiment with how I get from pose to pose. Yeah, so let's see. So it's gonna go down. Oops. So we're a little offset there. Settling up. Let me just save real quick. And even though I have my keyframes on my timeline right now, this doesn't mean they're correct. I'm flipping back and forth and thinking in my head, but I have the ability to move these keyframes all across the timeline and experiment, which is nice. Okay, so now we're gonna hit this. Now we still have, oh, you know what I'm gonna do before I go further? I am going to fix between here and here, because this is not, these legs are not, they're just not. And this is what's throwing me off. There's this space right here between, like, this line is going directly into the hip, and then it's not, it's going down here. So I'm gonna, technically the leg is already kind of cheated, but it's not the most correct, but it's fine. There we go. I just want to add a little more squash to this. I'll take that out too. Sometimes I'll take out little details if they're distracting. Okay. Good, okay. Save that. All right. So we're gonna need to basically have our, so right now for the upper body, we have the apex, we have that little bit of a drag where it's starting to be pulled downward, and then we have the anti-down. So what we need is like something around here for the body, and he's going to be turning his head. So that means it's going to head's going to turn this way, which means from here to here, will probably be continuing the head turn. So that means the head turn is going to continue into the settle, whereas before the head was kind of like finished turning before the settle. So it's good to know. Okay, so using there's too many things. Okay, there we go. So using my timeline like a timing chart, I want something that spatially represents this one here. So I'm gonna do right there. Yes. And put them on twos. Okay. So this head, I would start to fix it, but I saved it, I think. There we go. Yes! And now this head sticks a little bit too much, so I'm going to... This is the other thing. If you find that your frames, like, it's like, between here and here sticks a little bit, like, it's not what I want. What you need to do is just go to the frame, center on selection, and body and head. And what I'm going to do is I just, like, push out a bunch of frames, I tween it, and then I just pick something that's a little closer to my first frame. It's all about adjusting as you go along. Move you back. I will put a little bit of follow through in his head. But I'm not going to drag the head too much. I want to drag more of the ears. If I make the head too draggy, it will just do like a bounce. We have muscle tension in our necks. Our heads don't always have to bounce like a bobblehead. Okay. So turn. So now, and I'm just going to compare it to my original one. Like, I'm not even at my in-betweens yet. I'm just at my... But even just look at the difference of these poses, right? Even just the understanding of needing to change your weight or shift to allow something to lead and follow will bring you more interest to even just a simple action, right? Okay. Oop, I did the wrong one. They're okay, I'm gonna swap it to the other side. I got so confused. They're visually swapped. Okay, here we go. So now, between here and here, and this is kind of like my point, right? Between here, these two frames, what has the largest visual spacing and interest? It's the upper body. So this is another thing that I like to talk about it in terms of, contrast. A lot of the times when the whole body is moving at the same rate, the audience is looking at the whole body. If you move different body parts with different rates, that contrast will help you focus in the audience's attention where you want it to go. So at the end of a settle, having a character with more contrast in their face settling will draw the audience's eye to the face. If you have the arm settling and overshooting and settling, the audience is going to look at the arm. So understanding these things actually really helps you with the appeal of your animation. So now we got, okay, so we have that. I'm just going to fix up the arms right away. I'm going to give a little antic to the arms right here, actually. As this goes down, well, antic, I'm going to have them follow through. Okay. Okay. So we have that for this. Now, what you'll notice is, like, I'm really working a lot of these keys. This step, this ease down. But, and I will talk a little bit about more, like, I will talk about this more on Wednesday, because in Wednesday we're going to talk, like, I'm going to talk about timing just in general, to analyze timing, the stuff I think about in timing. My toon boom tutorials are, like, a little more technical, because I'm talking about the program. But honestly, if we're talking about like keyframes in terms of what they're communicating, every time you have offset, every time you have a part of a character that is traveling at a different rate or is hitting an extreme at a different time, that needs to be a keyframe. That's not an in-between. That's an important piece of the puzzle. So I really flip and look at these main parts of the action, because that's where all the information is, right? So my final timing, I will experiment a little bit, but the nice thing about Toon Boom is, even if I have like let's say maybe I don't want this to settle down as much, even if I don't use these keyframes at the end, I can use the information they have. Okay, so now we have the most extreme down. We have a swoosh and then a settle up. Now, we all know that the upper body is going to be hitting this extreme on the frame after the lower body. I mean, it doesn't have to, but in my head it does. So I'm going to tween it. And I'm going to treat this like a normal settle, which means, let's keep adding on to this. Hello? There we go. So with a settle, like, we've hit our overshoot, and now we're going to settle up. I don't want to favor the overshoot. So this is halfway. Boop. So I'm going to do something that generally what I do for settles, and especially with digital stuff, I always favor a little, like, right of center in my timing. You know, just a little scoochy to the other side. I always find that And maybe sometimes they favor too much, but I always find that's like a good place to start. So I'm going to pull it out to make sure that I have many options in my timeline. The more it's pulled out, because it's math, it separates. This is even. This is even. A reminder again, I have no Bezier curves on this. This is not Bezier curve timing. This is timing chart, timing, and specifically putting keyframes down. So if I want it here, I'm gonna translate that almost like it's like, man, you can just translate it directly, like, okay, like right here, right there. Yeah, okay, cool. And then I will move it over. Okay. So what do we do when it starts to settle up, but we don't want it to settle up? We take the most extreme down and we put it on the one after. And we fill in the blanks. Ooh. So here we go. Now we have that other part of the head turn we were looking for. And it's going to hit on the body's extreme, or the lower body's extreme down, but not the upper body's. So you see here, because the torso is moving up and down, this isn't connected, right? The torso is moving up and the body is moving down. Don't worry about it right now. We will fix it. But, okay. So this head is flipping. Smart me that I am, saved the other side of the head flip from my previous version. We're gonna copy it, paste it. Oh my gosh, here we go. Because once I fix a flip, I don't want to lose it. I don't want to do it again, right? Because I put a lot of work into crafting my own in-betweenable head angles, right? I don't want to get rid of it. Okay. So now we have this. Goes down. So this is where, again, you think about not pieces on a toon boom rig, but squashing and stretching and the physicality of the character. What happens if if you have parts that are like combining? Well, you squash and stretch them, right? Like this is where traditional animation principles come into play. And that means things are going to kind of like, it's going to bend more, right? Gonna drop his shoulders a little bit at the end here. It just feels more natural. There you go. So now you want to get that feeling not of things sliding, but of squashy shapes combining. Right? It's the same when we're thinking about I do this every time. If we're doing a bouncing ball, oh my gosh, stop it. Gotta make sure I'm on the right layer here. Okay, there we go. If we're doing a bouncing ball, and we have this force, and then it's hitting something. So you're going from like a force to all of a sudden it's like impacted. It is the same with parts of the body, right? And this is why it's always back to a bouncing ball. And this is why traditional drawing principles a lot of the times when I am using Toon Boom and I'm animating, people see the program and they see me using it and they see me deforming things and squashing and stretching things and all that. But this is I'm using a flour sack. It is the mental imagery of, you know, the physicality of the character and how I want them to move. So when we're offsetting body mechanics, I'm not talking about the program. I'm talking about, and in just like offsetting on pegs. Yes, that is a part of it because we're using this program, but it is about the animation principle of offsetting mechanics, bodily like physicality, muscles, and the push and the pull of these forces on each other. And when you kind of see them as squishy shapes, like this is what deformers should do, right? Like it no longer looks like it slides anymore. It looks like it's impacting, right? And this is what's going to get your harmony animation looking a little more naturalistic. And it comes down to, well, you have to train your eye. It takes a long time. But it's really about understanding the simple shapes and how they interact. This is why I like simple Toon Boom rigs. I like simple shapes because I can do this more. It takes a lot longer the more details you have. And the more details you have in a rig, the harder it's going to be to move all those details and make those details seem flexible and give them all the proper weight, right? Like, all of these things go into timing. And we'll go on a tangent. That's for Wednesday. Okay. Squash this down, and then settles up. Okay. I'm gonna stop it. I'm gonna start. I'm just gonna, well, save first. Gosh, save before you play. The timing is not, this is all just in a row. What am I doing? So, honestly, probably don't even need this one. I almost feel like this one is let's try this one. Okay, this actually works pretty good. It still looks a little choppy, and I'll tell you why, right? So you're here, it is weave though. You're here with me. I wouldn't be doing it if people were watching. So like, I really do, like, I say it, but I am sincere when I said weave because it does make a difference when I'm doing it for people. So we do need, this is big. We do need an ease out. So this is an extreme. So we want something that is, I guess it's my earlier pose. Okay. Frame 1, where the foot's down, and this is like frame like what, 7? Okay. So I want something that, because frame 7 is the apex. So I actually want an ease in. I don't want an ease out to the foot, but I do want an ease into this raised position. So I'm gonna choose something. Let's do full body first. Full body is gonna favor the first pose. Let's tween it. Something very even smaller than that. Even smaller. There we go. So again, I'm gonna explain this. So I'm gonna get something that favors the first pose. Currently, 1, 2, 3, 4, I have 4 frames that have split everything, the spacing evenly. And if I choose the most extreme one, this is the spacing. But this spacing may still be too big for what I want, right? Is where artist intent is always like key. I want something smaller than that because I want these out to be very subtle. But the foot, I don't want to have an ease out. I want it to already be mid-action. So I'm gonna go to the leg. Master leg. And it's, again, to offset things, it's easy peasy. You just in between that piece. So this is the upper part here. So actually I'm gonna take the lower, I'm gonna do the whole lower body. No, I changed my mind. I'm just gonna do the leg. Okay. Frantically, like, hitting keyframes and going, what is this? That's normal. That's normal Toon Boom process. At least for me. Okay. So I'm going to tween it, and you see how it's moving on its own here, as I'm only working on the leg. I'm going to pick something that favors. Here we go. Now the leg moves up. Now, one could say, couldn't you have just taken the leg and done this? Yes, but again, I'm talking about technique. It's the technique, it's the practice. So this is going to move up. I'm going to put a little wee smidge of movement here. And then you can even, I'm just going to drag the toe a little bit. So this is something that I think about, or that I try to explain a lot, is that slight shape change is good. Like, there's squash and stretch, but there is shape change, where you think about, again, the force. So if this is lifting up, if it's going up, even just the force of, like, on this point, like, this makes it look like the foot is being dragged down. This makes it look like the foot is being dragged up. So little things like this, again, for your own personal work and when it's appropriate, can really make a difference. Like, now we can, I'm just gonna work on this leg. So now we have a leg going up, it's hitting its apex, and then it kind of goes down. I think I want to push it a little further. There we go. Boop. Okay, cool. So another thing that I think I can get started on pretty quickly. Let me take a look at my session. Okay, we're making good time. That's what we have so far. Now, do you notice at the end, we get like kind of like a pop, like it looks janky at the end. And that's because even though we've been working on our keyframes, and by keyframes what I mean is the important stuff we need to have as we carve into our animation. So I have our lead, we have our follow. Like mechanically, there's not a lot I have to work on. Generally, I work on my keyframes until all of the like flips are fixed. But this in between's really fine, and that in between's fine, and this in between's fine. Cool, cool, cool. So now I want to talk about. Actually, wait. Scratch that. Let me go to the document with notes on it that I have written up but didn't look at once throughout this entire thing, because that is me. That is me. That is what I do. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yes. I think I'm good. I'm good to move on to talking about breaking down settles. So you can put a lot of work into really cool action sequences. You can put a lot of work into like lovely character acting that's moving around a lot. But what is going to make your animation, and not just in Toon Boom with like a digital stuff, but I'm going to be talking specifically about sort of like rigged 2D animation, is the word tweeny. Now, tweeny, floaty, slash, what it basically means is, you know, things are settling up sort of, like on a, I mean, it's settling up fine, but there's something that looks digital about it, which is fine. Everything's a style, but sometimes you may not want that style. And I'm going to give you an example of what it looks like. So let's say, I'm just going to quickly fill in some in-betweens here. So you can see what the difference of subtle is. Sorry, me and my brain had to search a little bit for what I was trying to say, but I found it. Okay. So ultimately, what are the times that happens in subtles? And okay, maybe I do nitpick subtles a little bit too much, but let's just say this is your subtle. This is your last frame. Because settles, you are slowing to a stop, right? It is your... The train is on the tracks, it is slowing down. So most settles are generally, you know, half. Like, you know, you are visibly kind of making a gradient, getting, like, smaller and smaller and smaller. Sorry, that really peaked the microphone. I'm so sorry. I scared myself in my head by that word. But basically, you're slowing down. So if I was to mimic this on my timeline, I would do something like this. Do something a little more, you know. I'm just gonna put all of this on too so you can see it. I'll even add 2 more for good measure. Okay. So subtles are, okay, there we go. I should turn this So this settle was just me putting in basic, putting in basic timing, right? And you could maybe say like, I could adjust the secondary on the ears, but there's nothing about this inherently that is like wrong. But settles will for me at least, this is a personal opinion, all of the work that goes into your keyframes, all of the swash and the stretch, that adds to the appeal, don't get me wrong, but your settle can kill it if there is not enough in your settle. The settle is where the audience is going to see the digitalness, because the closer your frames are together, the easier it is to see the digital perfection of it. That's just what it is. It's math. It's math. It's mathing the lines, right? Like, this is vector. This is vector. This is math. These are numbers, right? Zeros and ones. And I'm going to... What I do with my settles is I just break them down a little bit more to try to break up the math of it, basically. Because it waters it all down, and I like to, for me, it's most of it's character acting, it's character animation. So I like to keep the audience's eyes on the face. So I find it in the settle, when you're doing your settles, if everything's settling at the same rate, that's what the audience is going to notice. And if you go wild with it, they're going to notice too. So actually, I'm going to actually just take this right here and just put some secondary on it real fast. And I'm going to show you an example of settles that I see. And again, disclaimer, they're not bad. None of this is me saying if you're using these techniques or these timings, like, there's something wrong. There's not. They're the same things I used. It's more just like teaching little tricks to try to like get out of that and try different things if you want to, if it is like applicable. Because don't get me wrong, I love a good formula in a pinch. Okay, so I'm just gonna do a quick Sometimes I click so fast, even I don't know what I do. Okay. Let's go in this ear. Whenever you see me clicking and dragging things on the timeline, I have mental timing charts that I am employing. This is why it's hard for me to like really teach my technique, because I do so many things in my head. Alright, so let's fix your arms, my dude. Okay, yeah, that I offset that torso way too much. But you want something? Hey, I'm gonna leave it there. It is offset too much, but it'll be a good example. It will be a good example. Okay, now I'm gonna copy paste this, and we're gonna break down. I'll show you how I break down settles. Because I do passes of Toon Boom? Like, yes, absolutely. Stupid search bar keeps popping in front of my mouse. Stop it. Where are we? Unplug you. There we go. Here we go. Now we are back. We're gonna break down our settles. So usually what I do when I go to adjust a settle is, and part of this is just like my own way of thinking about animation. I mean, I do animation in passes, but a lot of times like I'm carving in details. Normally by the time I get to settles, it's like the only in-betweens I have. And again, we're going to talk about this on Wednesday. But my sort of practice, like if you want to practice breaking down settles, and if you want to practice building follow through into your settles, like the follow through, we'll do the follow through in the ears. This is a good way to practice. So if settles are generally sort of if we're kind of going this way, what I try to do is set up my settles so that I can fit in-betweens in between them. So what that means is my first keyframe of the settle may not be this one, but will be this one, and will be that one. So basically, like I kind of like a skip. I skip an in-between, and I do every other frame of settle, because usually if you do that, like if this is where your character is stopping, like they're stopping here and they're settling to a stop, it means they've stopped their momentum forward, and that means all the secondary is going to overshoot. So you're going to be implementing overshoots of things following through into your settle. So as the main character has already done their overshoots, if they have any, everything else still needs to follow through. So how do we build that in? So I'm going to, it's got some good ears for us to use. This was actually the first frame of settle. Okay, so this is our overshoot down. This is up. Okay. So, timing like a timing chart. I put my tween on. I am going to choose something that is not just slightly past the middle, but pretty past the middle. Maybe here. Maybe here. Because I have to favor even more than usual, because I want an in-between between these two. And not just an in-between that favors one to the other. I want to put an exact middle in between. So I almost have to like overcompensate for that, for it not being even. You can get even looking timing in Toon Boom all the time if you're not careful. So I'm going to choose something that's fairly favored, and I'm going to give enough room for an in-between to go in between here and here. And then on this frame, I am going to go to the head, because I know the head is technically still following through. And I'm just going to offset it. Oops. Set the whole thing. Thank you. Because basically what I want to do, this is my first keyframe of the saddle, I'm going to flip between this keyframe and my last frame. And I want to make sure that the focus, the biggest contrast, is here. Or wherever you want the audience's eye to go. The audience's eye is going to go to where the contrast is. And as subtle as it is, the biggest contrast between these two frames is the head. Everything is still settling up. Everything is still moving in the direction it did originally. But now, through the process, there is enough offset to the body that it actually highlights the things you want the audience to look at. So now I'm going to flip and make sure, this is where I start to put focus back into the face again. I spent a lot of time in the faces in the posing. And I put a lot of time in the faces in the saddle. And I do this because, oh my god, why are you so big? Wahapa. That's fine. Wild. I must have a, if the bounding box is this big, it means, oh, that's why. That's why. I must have accidentally scribbled on it. But since character animation is like my bread and butter, and that's always been the thing that, like, you know, give me the appealing character stuff. But the computer, because it is mathing, it's mathing in a way you asked it to, I always like to push. You gotta fight it to not water it down, right? So that means you push things a little further. Now, the head has a pretty decent, like, contrast. Take a look at the feet. Do you see how small that movement is? You see how small that is? But it's not frozen. It's not frozen. It can be frozen if you want. You know, at this point it gets so subtle. But again, it is the concept of the technique. And techniques depend on style, right? Like, not every character has to move every piece all the time. And I will eventually get into, like, graphic examples. But when it comes to making things not look, you know, as tweeny or digital, this can help a lot. So now we have, this goes down, and then the ears, we need to overshoot the ears. So where the ears are going to overshoot. Bump. And settle up. So now we have this. So now, again, we're going to get another breakdown to our saddle. I'm going to tween it. I'm going to take a look. Maybe here. Okay. So yours are going to overshoot. They're going to settle up. I'm going to just change the drag. Again, change the shape. I'm just going to adjust last frame. Okay. Now I am going to offset the eyes. Because I want to make sure that the face is not too frozen. Using my center on selection, I'm going to copy, paste. This side. Boop. Okay. And now what you can also do, so between here and here, again, like we have, it's our last two frames, we have the ears settling up. Let's see what happens if we overshoot the eyes a little bit. Not a lot. He doesn't have to like pop, but it's a something. Eyes. So what I'm going to do is copy and paste the eyes from my last frame and stick them on the frame before and swap them. Let's see how this looks. We'll squash down. Yeah. Let's just and again, squashing, understanding, especially in the face, like what is driving the muscles. If the eyebrows are going up and down, it's also gonna like adjust, like, you know, your forehead. I think about, you know, if the eyebrows are settling down, I like to put a little squash. Okay, I'll put a little extra. There we go. Save really quick. Okay, well, let's take a look. I should pull that out a little more so you can see. So now when the character settles up, you can actually see how the motion of the lower body kind of goes lower body, mid body, and it travels up to the head. And it immediately brings your eye to the character's face. And because I favored my in-betweens, when I go to, because I favored my spacing on my breakdown settles, my in-betweens aren't too hard. Oftentimes I favor so that I can just tween it and stick an in-between directly in the middle. But at the end, I will favor it and put maybe 2 more settles in. So nice steps down. The eyes pop a little bit too much. I would smooth that out. But that, I mean, that's nitpicky territory. That's nitpicky territory. We're talking about technique here. Okay, so this Now this saddle has more in it, but it is still connected. And let's bring back our other... Here we go. Let's compare them side by side. This is actually very slow. I'm gonna speed it up. I actually think... Yeah, I think that's better. Let's try this. Yeah, that's better. We didn't need that in between. We didn't need it. I actually kind of like... I rather... Well, I don't like overdoing things, but at least if you overdo something in Toon Boom, you still have that information. You can always kind of water it down yourself. Like, oh, I squashed it too much. How do I unsquash it? Well, you can just tween it and pick something that's not as squashed. But these are the differences, not necessarily in this is how you should animate your action, but if you choose something to lead the action and you choose something to follow the action, again, not secondary in terms of like ears or materials, but in body mechanics, it will help lead you down the path of thinking about what parts of the body affect what other parts of the body. The rig is a tool. You have to bring the physicality to it and the understanding of the anatomy underneath the character. This is something that drawing the character, so if you're using a rig and you've never drawn that character before, draw that character. Draw over the rig. Draw that character in poses. Because these are the things that can help elevate your Toon Boom stuff to the next level. And again, like, there's nothing wrong with what is on the right. But if we take a look at this is just animation theory principle of that. But when we look at this, where is the biggest contrast? You know, when you start to see the difference... Oop, I need that. Clicking frantically. Just the body mechanics, the difference of like a character shifting over and changing shape in their leg, the fact that you can see the pull, the fact that, you know, as they settle, you can see this, like, take a look at the stretch in the face over here, right on the left. Look at how the expression pulls up. And compare that to the right, where yes, it's settling up, but there's nothing in it that shows that it has it's only you know, it's just the tween doing the rest of it. So the settles are very key in appeal, and even though they're technically easier because you don't have things changing a bunch and you don't have things flipping, they're very difficult in that they can... This is the part that the audience sees. This is the part that you are leaving the audience's eye on, and they won't be able to pick out the technicalities of your movement. A lot of audience members don't really know the difference between like a well done... No, I mean, yes, they can tell between a well done animation, but like there's so much nuance in a settle that you really have to think about because there's nothing to hide behind, right? So, but it takes practice, and what's more important is just the thought process and trying it for yourself and, you know, trying these techniques out one at a time. And it may be offsetting in your keyframes. Maybe the first thing the first thing you want to try, and just the try, is offsetting a head or offsetting an arm. That's great. Just start with that. Maybe keyframes and offsetting things is really difficult for you right now. It's not clicking, but maybe you want to try breaking down a settle to at least practice the secondary. Cool. All of these things add up, and you will find your own little stuff. Now, I would say, yes, okay, that's my lesson. Ooh, I made good time. Actually made very good time. Oh, awesome. Yes. So I got my lesson in. This is what I want to talk about today, which is great. I will put this up on my YouTube. But for the rest of the 15 minutes I have, if anybody has any questions or things they would like me to go over, or things to clarify, go for it. Post the questions. But if you're here for the lesson and you want to head out, thank you so much for coming to watch. I hope you learned some things. And as always, you can check this out on my YouTube channel, littledigits_tutorials. I will be uploading this there hopefully this evening. And please join me on Wednesday if you can. If not, obviously we'll have the recording too. It will not be a Toon Boom tutorial. We will not talking about Toon Boom technicalities. We will just talk about timing, animation timing. I love to get in the weeds about rhythms and tension. I talk about squash and stretch, but I like to dig a little deeper into the concept of squash and stretch and talking about acting. We'll talk a little bit about acting because I like going into those sort of rabbit holes. But it's going to be a lot of thinking about the different ways we can approach timing, because I struggled a lot with that. I struggled a lot with understanding timing and how to choose it. So I'm excited, as someone who likes talking about it after they hated it. I hope to make it easier for other people. Oh, it's such a nice day outside. It's cold though, but it was nice the other day. I hope everyone watching is having a survivable day. So, but there doesn't seem to be any questions, which is great. It means I hopefully didn't confuse all of you. Oh, thank you for the follow, Dazbons. Awesome. But yeah, well, I hope to see you all on Wednesday, and now I have a Harmony license. For a while, I want to say shout out to Mercury Filmworks, who gave me the license, even though I am on a break right now. They didn't have to do it, but my team and my coworkers there are so amazing. So this license allows me to share this information for free, and I actually have the time to do it, which is extremely cool of the good team there. But yeah, I will see you all on Wednesday or next Monday, where I will continue with the Toon Boom lessons. Until then, have a good day, everybody. Farewell.